Chapter 14 of Allan's Wife. This recording is in the public domain. Allan's Wife by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 14. 15 years after. Both Stella and Tota were too weary to be moved, so we camped that night in the baboons' home, but were troubled by no baboons. Stella would not sleep in the cave. She said the place terrified her, so I made her up a kind of bed under a thorn tree. As this rock-bound valley was one of the hottest places I was ever in, I thought that this would not matter. But when at sunrise on the following morning I saw a veil of miasmatic mist hanging over the surface of the ground, I changed my opinion. However, neither Stella nor Tota seemed the worse, so as soon as was practical we started homewards. I had already, on the previous day, sent some of the men back to the kraals to fetch a ladder, and when we reached the cliff we found them waiting for us beneath. With the help of the ladder the descent was easy. Stella simply got out of her rough litter at the top of the cliff, for we found it necessary to carry her, climbed down the ladder and got into it again at the bottom. Well, we reached the kraals safely enough, seeing nothing more of Hendrika, and, were this a story, doubtless I should end it here with "and lived happily ever after." But alas, it is not so. How am I to write it? My dearest wife's vital energy seemed completely to fail her now that the danger was past, and within 12 hours of our return I saw that her state was such as to necessitate the abandonment of any idea of leaving Babyan Kraals at present. The bodily exertion, the anguish of mind, and the terror which she had endured during that dreadful night, combined with her delicate state of health, had completely broken her down. To make matters worse, also, she was taken with an attack of fever, contracted no doubt in the unhealthy atmosphere of that accursed valley. In time she shook the fever off, but it left her dreadfully weak, and quite unfit to face the trial before her. I think she knew that she was going to die. She always spoke of my future, never of our future. It is impossible for me to tell how sweet she was, how gentle, how patient and resigned. Nor, indeed, do I wish to tell it. It is too sad. But this I will say. I believe that if ever a woman drew near to perfection while yet living on earth, Stella Quatermain did so. The fatal hour drew on. My boy, Harry, was born, and his mother lived to kiss and bless him. Then she sank. We did what we could, but we had little skill, and might not hold her back from death. All through one weary night I watched her with a breaking heart. The dawn came, the sun rose in the east. His rays falling on the peak behind were reflected in glory upon the bosom of the western sky. Stella awoke from her swoon and saw the light. She whispered to me to open the door of the hut. I did so, and she fixed her dying eyes on the splendour of the morning sun. She looked on me and smiled as an angel might smile. Then, with a last effort, she lifted her hand and, pointing to the radiant heavens, whispered, "There, Allan, there." It was done, and I was broken-hearted, and broken-hearted I must wander to the end. Those who have endured my loss will know my sorrow. It cannot be written. In such peace and at such an hour may I also die. Yes, it is a sad story, but wander where we will about the world we can never go beyond the sound of the passing bell. For me, as for my father before me, and for the millions who have been and who shall be, there is but one word of comfort. The Lord hath given, and the Lord hath taken away. Let us then bow our heads in hope, and add with a humble heart, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." I buried her by her father's side, and the weeping of the people who had loved her went up to heaven. Even Indaba-zimbi wept, but I could weep no more. On the second night from her burial I could not sleep. I rose, dressed myself, and went out into the night. The moon was shining brightly, and by its rays I shaped my course towards the graveyard. I drew near silently, and as I came I thought that I heard a sound of moaning on the further side of the wall. I looked over it. Crouched by Stella's grave and tearing at its sods with her hands as though she would unearth that which lay within, was Hendrika. Her face was wild and haggard, her form so emaciated that when the pelts she wore slipped aside, the shoulder blades seemed to project almost through her skin. Suddenly she looked up and saw me. Laughing a dreadful maniac laugh, she put her hand to her girdle and drew her great knife from it. I thought that she was about to attack me, and prepared to defend myself as best I could, for I was unarmed. But she made no effort to do so. Lifting the knife on high, for a moment she held it glittering in the moonlight, then plunged it into her own breast and fell headlong to the ground. I sprang over the wall and ran to her. She was not yet dead. Presently she opened her eyes, and I saw that the madness had gone out of them. "Macumazahn," she said, speaking in English and in a thick, difficult voice like one who half forgot and half remembered. "Macumazahn, I remember now. I have been mad. Is she really dead, Macumazahn?" "Yes," I said, "she is dead, and you killed her." "I killed her," the dying woman faltered, "and I loved her. Yes, yes, I know now. I became a brute again and dragged her to the brutes, and now once more I am a woman, and she is dead, and I killed her because I loved her so. I killed her who saved me from the brutes. I am not dead yet, Macumazahn. Take me and torture me to death, slowly, very slowly. It was jealousy of you that drove me mad, and I have killed her, and now she can never forgive me." "Ask forgiveness from above," I said, for Hendrika had been a Christian, and the torment of her remorse touched me. "I ask no forgiveness," she said. "May God torture me forever because I killed her. May I become a brute forever till she comes to find me and forgives me. I only want her forgiveness." And wailing in an anguish of the heart so strong that her bodily suffering seemed to be forgotten, Hendrika, the baboon woman, died. I went back to the kraals, and waking Indaba-zimbi, told him what had happened, asking him to send someone to watch the body, as I proposed to give it burial. But next morning it was gone, and I found that the natives, hearing of the event, had taken the corpse and thrown it to the vultures with every mark of hate. Such, then, was the end of Hendrika. A week after Hendrika's death I left Babyan Kraals. The place was hateful to me now, it was a haunted place. I sent for old Indaba-zimbi and told him that I was going. He answered that it was well. "The place has served your turn," he said. "Here you have won that joy which was fated you should win, and have suffered those things that it was fated you should suffer. Yes, and though you know it not now, the joy and the suffering, like the sunshine and the storm, are the same thing, and will rest at last in the same heaven, the heaven from which they came. Now go, Macumazahn." I asked him if he was coming with me. "No," he answered. "Our paths lie apart henceforth, Macumazahn. We met together for certain ends. Those ends are fulfilled. Now each one goes his own way. You have still many years before you, Macumazahn. My years are few. When we shake hands here it will be for the last time. Perhaps we may meet again, but it will not be in this world. Henceforth we have each of us a friend the less." "Heavy words," I said. "True words," he answered. Well, I have little heart to write the rest of it. I went, leaving Indaba-zimbi in charge of the place, and making him a present of such cattle and goods as I did not want. Tota I, of course, took with me. Fortunately by this time she had almost recovered the shock to her nerves. The baby Harry, as he was afterwards named, was a fine, healthy child, and I was lucky in getting a respectable native woman, whose husband had been killed in the fight with the baboons, to accompany me as his nurse. Slowly, and followed for a distance by all the people, I trekked away from Babyan Kraals. My route towards Natal was along the edge of the Bad Lands, and my first night's outspan was beneath that very tree where Stella, my lost wife, had found us as we lay dying of thirst. I did not sleep much that night, and yet I was glad that I had not died in the desert about 11 months before. I felt then, as from year to year I have continued to feel while I wander through the lonely wilderness of life, that I had been preserved to an end. I had won my darling's love, and for a little while we had been happy together. Our happiness was too perfect to endure. She is lost to me now, but she is lost to be found again. Here on the following morning I bade farewell to Indaba zimbi. "Good-bye, Macumazahn," he said, nodding his white lock at me. "Good-bye for a while. I am not a Christian, your father could not make me that, but he was a wise man, and when he said that those who loved each other shall meet again, he did not lie. And I too am a wise man in my way, Macumazahn, and I say it is true that we shall meet again. All my prophecies to you have come true, Macumazahn, and this one shall come true also. I tell you that you shall return to Babyan Kraals and shall not find me. I tell you that you shall journey to a further land than Babyan Kraals and shall find me. Farewell." And he took a pinch of snuff, turned, and went. Of my journey down to Natal there is little to tell. I met with many adventures, but they were of an everyday kind, and in the end arrived safely at Port Durban, which I now visited for the first time. Both Tota and my baby boy bore the journey well, and here I may as well chronicle the destiny of Tota. For a year she remained under my charge. Then she was adopted by a lady, the wife of an English colonel who was stationed at the Cape. She was taken by her adopted parents to England, where she grew up a very charming and pretty girl, and ultimately married a clergyman in Norfolk. But I never saw her again, though we often wrote to each other. Before I returned to the country of my birth, she too had been gathered to the land of shadows, leaving 3 children behind her. Ah me! All this took place so long ago, when I was young, who am now old. Perhaps it may interest the reader to know the fate of Mr. Carson's property, which should of course have gone to his grandson Harry. I wrote to England to claim the estate on his behalf, but the lawyer to whom the matter was submitted said that my marriage to Stella, not having been celebrated by an ordained priest, was not legal according to English law, and therefore Harry could not inherit. Foolishly enough I acquiesced in this, and the property passed to a cousin of my father-in-law's. But since I have come to live in England, I have been informed that this opinion is open to great suspicion, and that there is every probability that the courts would have declared the marriage perfectly binding, as having been solemnly entered into in accordance with the custom of the place where it was contracted. But I am now so rich that it is not worth while to move in the matter. The cousin is dead, his son is in possession, so let him keep it. Once, and once only, did I revisit Babyan Kraals. Some 15 years after my darling's death, when I was a man in middle life, I undertook an expedition to the Zambesi, and one night outspanned at the mouth of the well-known valley beneath the shadow of the great peak. I mounted my horse and, quite alone, rode up the valley, noticing with a strange prescience of evil that the road was overgrown, and, save for the music of the waterfalls, the place silent as death. The kraals that used to be to the left of the road by the river had vanished. I rode towards their site. The mealie fields were choked with weeds, the paths were dumb with grass. Presently I reached the place. There, overgrown with grass, were the burnt ashes of the kraals, and there among the ashes, gleaming in the moonlight, lay the white bones of men. Now it was clear to me. The settlement had been fallen on by some powerful foe, and its inhabitants put to the assegai. The forebodings of the natives had come true. Babyan Kraals was peopled by memories alone. I passed on up the terraces. There shone the roofs of the marble huts. They would not burn, and were too strong to be easily pulled down. I entered one of them, it had been our sleeping hut, and lit a candle which I had with me. The huts had been sacked, leaves of books and broken mouldering fragments of the familiar furniture lay about. Then I remembered that there was a secret place hollowed in the floor and concealed by a stone, where Stella used to hide her little treasures. I went to the stone and dragged it up. There was something within wrapped in rotting native cloth. I undid it. It was the dress my wife had been married in. In the centre of the dress were the withered wreath and flowers she had worn, and with them a little paper packet. I opened it. It contained a lock of my own hair. I remembered then that I had searched for this dress when I came away and could not find it, for I had forgotten the secret recess in the floor. Taking the dress with me, I left the hut for the last time. Leaving my horse tied to a tree, I walked to the graveyard through the ruined garden. There it was a mass of weeds, but over my darling's grave grew a self-sown orange bush, of which the scented petals fell in showers on to the mound beneath. As I drew near there was a crash and a rush. A great baboon leapt from the centre of the graveyard and vanished into the trees. I could almost believe that it was the wraith of Hendrika doomed to keep an eternal watch over the bones of the woman her jealous rage had done to death. I tarried there a while, filled with such thoughts as may not be written. Then, leaving my dead wife to her long sleep, where the waters fall in melancholy music beneath the shadow of the everlasting mountain, I turned and sought that spot where first we had told our love. Now the orange grove was nothing but a tangled thicket. Many of the trees were dead, choked with creepers, but some still flourished. There stood the one beneath which we had lingered. There was the rock that had been our seat, and there on the rock sat the wraith of Stella, the Stella whom I had wed. Ay, there she sat, and on her upturned face was that same spiritual look which I saw upon it in the hour when we had first kissed. The moonlight shone in her dark eyes, the breeze wavered in her curling hair, her breast rose and fell, a gentle smile played about her parted lips. I stood transfixed with awe and joy, gazing on that lost loveliness which once was mine. I could not speak, and she spoke no word. She did not even seem to see me. Now her eyes fell. For a moment they met mine, and their message entered into me. Then she was gone. She was gone. Nothing was left but the tremulous moonlight falling where she had been, the melancholy music of the waters, the shadow of the everlasting mountain, and in my heart the sorrow and the hope. End of chapter 14. End of Allan's Wife by H. Rider Haggard.